we did a big deal to reintroduce ourselves and start off, and then we both had mandatory civic duties that got in the way. So it's been a while, but we're back, and a lot has happened. So welcome in, make yourselves comfortable, open wide the doors to fandom on this day of our Lord Rao, the great sun, the great red sun of Krypton. And it looks like, a couple of us guys here, Supermen is super guys like us, but it looks like we're going to watch our favorite hero, Superman. Looks like he may just fly off into the sun like the great bird, and be done with. We're going to do a bigger episode. We'll get everybody, the whole team together, and talk about the whole fiasco that is whatever Warner Brothers is trying or supposedly going to do with Superman, with all the Henry Cavill stuff and everything else that's going down. But the one thing that stood out to me, and I was interested to ask all of you out there in the audience what you think, but also get EDL here and pick his brain a little bit about, the thing that stood out to me more than anything else, though, was this idea that the rumor that they're going to essentially replace Superman with Supergirl, right, which was hinted at. There's a story behind that, but just this concept that, they want to go with Supergirl instead of Superman. That's one of the first things that stood out to me, primarily because how does the character survive, and how does Superman last as a character if he is owned and operated by people who don't want anything to do with him, don't seem to understand him, and disrespect him every chance they get? We thought that they were turning the corner from Batman vs Superman and into Justice League. Even people can claim it's a big mess, but I thought they had turned the corner there. But this takes us, all that ground that was made up is now, it seems it's in danger of all being completely lost. And that fear that I've talked about in the past, the idea that he's going to become the Mickey Mouse of DC or Warner Brothers. He might appear and fly past the opening logos, but never be seen and never be a viable character again. I don't know. I don't know I don't know where we go from here. I don't know where they go from here.
It seems like this is more a Warner Brother issue than a DC issue, because DC, after the Rebirth comics, has tried everything they could to bring the character back. I mean, they've even brought back the red trunks for the character. So DC seems more or less inclined to put the character back where he was before the whole New 52 and the reboot of the comic book. So this seems more or less a clear motivation for Warner Brothers in particular to just kind of do what they want to do with it. And to me, it doesn't scream more or less that they don't hate the character. I don't think that they hate the character. I think that they don't care about the character. But it seems more or less like they just, they want to pop pop movie tickets, pop sales. So it's like, let's get the, let's shoehorn the female character in there and make it Supergirl or Superwoman, depending on however you want to, orchestrate that, and, have that be the running character from this point forward. That way, it's more of an appealing statement to have that than to have, Superman, especially with where things are going, just for the sole purpose of just, hey, we'll get internet sensations, we'll get, viral clicks, we'll get all this stuff, and that'll generate to box office success. I think that's more or less what they're...
Will they, though? Will that actually work? Because as far as I know, Ocean's 8 did not go the same route as the Girl Busters, right? It didn't go that same route. Apparently it was played straightforward, and it didn't do gangbusters. And I get that they would think to themselves, gee, Marvel is making billions of dollars with a walking tree that talks. I get that. The characters Superman as a character, with the ownership, it's an individual thing. So Warner Brothers does not seem to understand or get the character, like you said, don't care about it. DC disrespects the character endlessly. Now, I know you're saying they're trying to do a big thing with the New 52, but look back at the track record here. It was Future's End, and then you go through what was supposed to be this big deal with John Romita coming on, and it just, all of it, we can... none of those delivered up even close to the hype. I believe there was a Justice League versus Suicide Squad. That, again, DC. So this idea that people say, well, let DC take over, put them in charge the way Marvel has control, and things will be fixed. I don't believe that for 1 second, based on the track record, because I think it was Suicide Squad versus Justice League in the comic books, and Scrapster, talked to me about it. It was just the same old horrible thing. Superman, it's his fault. They lose, and they lose because of him, and he takes it on the chin and it just goes down like a chump. The same way they had that Futures In thing, or Convergence. It was one of those two. He flies in like a hero, looking like he's about to save the day, and then just gets owned right off the bat, or the legendary animated DC stuff, right? The one I just can't get over, right? Was it Justice League Doom, right? Same thing, right? Even Batman looks like he's about to put Superman over for this heroic moment. He'll do it. He'll save the day, and then Toot the Sweet Superman just fails utterly pathetically, and it's up to everybody else to say. That's why I argue, and I say, yeah, Warner Brothers, on their side of it, they don't seem to understand the character at all, and are kind of, at best, it seems like they're very lukewarm about him. Whereas DC seems like they're actively trying to undermine the character at every step of the way. That's why I look at it without much confidence.
I heard the same thing about Ocean's 8. I read some of the reviews and stuff. Haven't gotten to watch it myself, but yeah, that they more or less, they try to play it like a straight thing. She's a cousin of Clooney's, and so she's just doing her own.
It wasn't slapstick.
And for all intents and purposes, it's like, okay, it's whatever. I mean, it's a remake of something which typically nowadays has a pretty kind of meh connotation when you sit there and know it's a remake, because sometimes remakes are made and people don't know it's a remake. Like A Star Is Born, it's been made like 47 times, and people are still like, I saw some people on Twitter talking about, oh my god, one of the top searches on Google is A Star Is Born based on Lady Gaga's life? And it's like, okay, you don't know that that's a remake. I'll let you, obviously, yeah, you're going to have that opinion. But, when it comes to that type of thing, I mean, first and foremost, like, I don't care when it's done that way. It's just, don't make it so blatantly obvious that you're doing it for popularity, which, more or less always kind of seems like, yeah, that's what DC does when they make their decisions. It seems like they're not doing it because they have artistic creativity directed towards this way, that they're doing it because, everybody else has women, so, why don't we put women in the front? Because, look at Star Wars, that sells. I mean, we can sell too. So that is where I draw my issues with, and then moving from that aspect, like I said, from there, then it comes down to, yeah, Warner Brothers treats everything like a business, and you can see it more and more when these types of decisions are made, or just the whole fiasco of Superman, where he's off, no, he's not off, the character's here, but it's not, even going into the whole Batman thing, Alec Baldwin's Thomas Wayne, no, he's not, it's Brett Cullen's, Joker's not a part of the canon, but if the film does really well, Joaquin Phoenix may be a part of the canon of the DCEU. It's like, there's so much inconsistency there, and it just comes clear, cut, and dry after that point, that they're not treating this anything more than, yeah, it's just a business. It's just, hey, if this isn't selling it, then we're just going to cut loose with it and do something else different, and then try to make it work from there. And that's like I said, when you see that followed with, leading with Supergirl, yeah, it kind of comes more that they don't care about, they're not focused on women empowerment. They're just focused on, sales from women. And then the last point about
which is
that,
ironic, because this is literally women who are empowered with superpowers.
And so going from there, the last thing about DC is, like, when you look at the comics, they shifted away from Superman focused story arcs where, Superman isn't the lead character, or it isn't focused on his aspect of it, where they have things like, Ramita comes in and, it's focused on an entirely new character and not on Superman in that aspect. With the Rebirth saga, what you end up having is you have like I said, they started bringing the character back towards it, where yeah, stylistically he they brought back the Trongs. He has more of a post crisis or post Flashpoint Paradox outfit. So red Trunks, brighter outfit and everything. It doesn't look like it's made out of battle armor, and focus more on the story arcs being about Superman, being about tough decisions, and a character that has to figure out now more or less how to be a father with godlike powers in this world. Is kind of more of the shift that they've taken to it, so that the evolutionary step of the character is okay. Now this character, basically they took the post paradox Superman and said, okay, what if he married and settled down? What if now he has a kid and everything? What would that Superman's life look like? What would that Superman's life entail? And so that's more or less where their stories are coming from, which is more or less good. And of course, there's always going to be, when it comes to other people, when it comes to other crossover events, he's going to be one of the characters that gets knocked out of it, because it's just a way to kind of emphasize how dangerous that threat is, that yeah, you have this villain, or you have this and everything coming in, and, oh look, he took out Superman and Wonder Woman, oh, it's such a threat. Now you have these depowered people like Green Arrow, and Green Lantern, who's losing his battery charge, and Batman, and they have to save the day, because that's an overcoming the odds tale that everybody roots for the underdog type of thing. But outside of that, it just seemed more like they've at the very least tried to make an emphasis of treating Superman in his comics as the main focal point of it, albeit like I said, they made some variance differences, like by making him a father and everything. You read those comic books and it's not somebody else's story. It's not something else or someone else that's, just involving themselves in the Superman tale. It's a Superman tale, and then, everybody kind of works around that.
Sure about that? You sure there's not a lot of focus on Mr. Oz or Zod and Zod's little mission via the Phantom Zone, all kinds of stuff like that? Didn't Superman go blind and stumble around, get whooped around and slapped around, and then his son had to get inside of an Iron Man suit or something, and Mr. Oz had to step in and all that kind of stuff?
Well, again,
that was Rebirth, right? It sort of seems like they've it just seems like when you really step back and look at it, like you said, they like to avoid reboot, so they came up with something very creative and called it Rebirth, which is brilliant. It just seems like they rebirthed all the old stereotypes. It's a problem. It's a running theme, though, right? That's why I look at this and I'm like, we don't know. We'll only find out when we see it. But like with Aquaman, at least they're making a point of trying to say, okay, Aquaman will have no other interferences from other characters. It's not going to be a big crossover event. They kind of let him do his own thing. They didn't shoehorn in another character, which I'm okay. I was okay with Batman vs Superman, and I wound up really liking the film. Everything else seems like they have to shoehorn everything. Any other character they can think of. Now I know the Romita and Jeff Johns story took place pre-Rebirth, but still, it just seems like the trend kind of goes on. I mean, Superman wasn't Superman. They killed Superman, then we have another Superman, and then Lex Luthor is now taking up the mantle, and Lex Luthor has a suit and a big S on his chest now. It's just like no other character. No one does this with any other character. It seemed like they were right on the edge to finally break away from that, because for all the controversy that everyone can argue to the end of time about Batman versus Superman, one of the big things that it did was, I've used this term, it's sort of like The Exorcist. Zack Snyder was the Exorcist and exorcised that the kind of demon of the Frank, not to be serious, but the Frank Miller, The Dark Knight Returns, that cloud that hung over Superman ever since that storyline. He kind of undid that and freed Superman from that. Right. Now, I know a lot of people didn't see it that way. Many people were so caught up in everything else. But again, for me, it just draws back to, when are they going to take that next step into something else? They seem like they've gotten to the edge of this cliff 100 times, but have never taken the leap. And it's Superman we're talking about. Leap off and fly, up and away. You get to the cliff and fly away. Go to do something different. but it seems like they're stuck in this circle now. Even without the Dark Knight Returns legacy casting a shadow over the character anymore, that was my whole major disappointment with Jeff Johns, that I understand was before they have went into Rebirth, but just the idea they had a chance to do something new and fresh, and this is one of Marvel's greatest artists and legacy artist was going to come on board. The idea they came up with was, let's introduce a whole new character into the fray here, and then focus a lot on the other character. Now you've never had a chance like this before. Literally, do something new and different with the character, not like let's do something new and different. Let's give him a new power, then depower him, and then he can ride around like a biker and do all the things that Superman doesn't do. Ride around in a Harley and all that kind of stuff. Again, I understand that was pre-Rebirth, but they've done it right off the bat with the Lex Luthor angle, the Mr. Oz or whatever that. It was Jor-El. Spoilers. Spoilers, but it was Jor-El essentially in some weirded out, whacked out story, right? Where again, it's, and then of course he's got his son now and all this. Lois Lane is Superwoman, as so much stuff is going on. And if you say that Superman's not the right character, as you pointed out, she hasn't had a ton of stories that have really been extremely popular, and she doesn't have the same history that Superman does. And even if you do what the TV show is doing, you take Supergirl and put her in the Superman stories, if the problem is Superman, how does Supergirl fix it? Just because you gender swap it, even though she's a totally different character, how does that fix anything? It's just all good. You're going to take Supergirl and you're going to be right back in the same problem. But ultimately, I have to say for sure, ultimately for me, as a huge Superman fan, as much as I love the Supergirl character, it's just extremely frustrating because now I look at it like, well, Superman's been, sent to the bench